I would like to introduce our next speaker. His name is Noah Snavely, and he's a professor at Cornell University in the Computer Science Department, and he's going to tell us all about his experience with the career program.
Hey everybody, thanks Shule. Thanks for inviting me here. So yeah, I've been at Cornell now for about 3.5 years. This is all very fresh in my mind because I wrote a career proposal a few years ago, which wasn't funded. I'll talk about that. But recently I was funded this year, so I remember very well all the things I did. I thought you might like to see what it actually looks like. I mean, here's my proposal, the summary, of course, intellectual merit, broader impacts. You don't actually have to read this, but if you're interested, I'd be happy to share it with you afterwards. Here's what the actual 15-page meat of the proposal looks like. Actually, when I looked at it, it had fewer figures than I remembered putting in. And your proposal may look nothing like this, but just if you want a sample, here's what it looks like. I think maybe the interesting thing is this part after here is on the education plan and broader impacts. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So yeah, so I spent a lot of stuff on research and some, maybe a page and a half on the education plan and outreach and so on. So, I should preface this by saying I have no idea what I'm doing. This is just one data point, so take this with a grain of salt, but you'll hear a number of other speakers who tell them their experience as well. I'll just tell you what worked for me and what didn't work. And then, of course, references, and there's a new thing where you have to submit a data plan. I did that, wrote a half page, and submitted it. Okay. So just a little bit about my background. So I graduated with my PhD from University of Washington in 2008. I work in computer vision and graphics, and in particular in 3D modeling from large image collections. So then right away I started as assistant professor at Cornell University. I should say I sort of accidentally became a professor. It wasn't my life goal necessarily. It sort of just happened. So anyway, I felt a bit unprepared, and I've been learning a lot along the way, but if you feel the same way, I'd be happy to talk to you about my experiences so far. So I wrote a career proposal right after I started, so the summer after I started in January, wrote a career proposal in 2009. That was rejected, which I have to say was very depressing to me. Felt very bad about it. I spent a lot of time working on the proposal. I thought it was a great proposal, but it was rejected, so clearly the panel didn't think as highly as it. But actually, in retrospect, I think this was a good thing. The feedback was quite good. I'll talk about what was said. I was very naive when I wrote my first proposal, I feel, and this helped me figure out how to write better proposals and also figure out how to think about my research plan. This experience of getting rejected helped me think about my research plan in a more concrete and useful way. Okay. So I took some time off. I worked on other things for a while. I could have submitted another proposal the next year. I didn't. I chose not to. I wanted to just take time off and think about, do soul searching and so on. In the meantime, I submitted other joint NSF proposals to the core program, a medium and a large, and some others. Some of these were funded. I also served on a panel. That was a very useful experience. This was not a career panel, but just one of the normal core panels. Seeing how that worked was very illuminating. Then I wrote a second career proposal last summer, which was then funded early this year. And again, I think the second proposal was much better than the first one. Okay, so I could tell you a little bit of my thought process. I was very new. I had no idea what I was doing. I know a little bit more now, but I talked to people at my university about what I should write about. And basically, the general advice was what I think was talked about earlier. I wanted to find something that's not too close to my thesis, so it's my own work. I'm defining my own direction. But not so far that it's something completely different. I lack all credibility in that area. Okay? So that there's that sort of trade-off. And then I want to find something that's ambitious, but not too ambitious. So I felt sort of boxed in many different directions in choosing a topic. So it's sort of an interesting set of constraints. But so I think that this last thing is actually what got me the first time I wrote a proposal. So I had this grand vision about what I wanted to do. You know, it was a good 5-year plan, I thought, and beyond. But I just wasn't specific enough about how I would actually carry out that vision. So I had a lot of sort of vague sounding promises, but not much sort of actual meat in how I would carry it out. So the reviews sort of reveal this. I mean, it wasn't funded. They were saying, you know, there were things in the reviews like, you know, this is a good direction, but I have no idea how you're actually going to do it. I don't think, you haven't convinced me that this is actually a doable plan. I'm talking mainly about the research plan now. I'll talk about the teaching and outreach plan in a minute. So I fell into the trap, which I think is very easy to fall into, of having something that sounds nice on paper, but you don't actually back it up with a concrete plan of how you're going to achieve it. Okay? So the second time I tried to be much more specific about how I think, you know, how I would approach solving a certain problem, what kind of algorithms I'm thinking about designing, and you know, putting much more detail into specifics without going too far. I mean, you still want to have that overall vision. Okay. So actually, I don't think that was the only thing I was dinged on, but I think that was probably what killed the proposal. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the timeline. So the first time I was very worried and stressed, and I felt like I had to spend, you know, hundreds of hours working on the proposal, and I probably ended up spending about that, you know, on that order. You know, for more than a month, I worked on it a few hours a day. It's hard to work on something like this for longer than that because your brain starts to turn to mush, basically. And so, but I was thinking about it all the time. I spent a lot of time, you know, if we were still working in the age of typewriters, you know, I'd have a waste paper bin that was full of crumpled up ideas and, you know, bad drafts of proposals. But so I spent a lot of time about it, thinking about what I wanted to do. I was very conscientious about asking for feedback. I was a little worried because there's a sense in which I could imagine, and I think I felt a little bit, I could imagine being nervous about asking senior faculty for advice because, well, for a variety of reasons. One is, you know, they'll be evaluating your tenure case at some point. So if you show them something which you think might be not a good proposal, you know, maybe that you think that would reflect badly on it. But I think it's actually, I wouldn't worry about that. I think it's a great, I'm very glad I asked for feedback. I showed them my proposal, they read through it, they gave me very good feedback. It still was rejected, but I felt it was very useful to do that. And the advice they gave me has helped me, you know, on other proposals as well. So I think it's very good, and most senior faculty are very understanding of this whole process. They've been there, and so they want to help you. Second time was very different. So I should say, I had many more things to worry about the second time than I did the first, because that summer I didn't have any students yet. So I didn't actually have all that much to do. So therefore I had a lot of time to kill, and I worked on my proposal a lot. The second time you know, my life was pure chaos by then, and so I didn't have that much time to work on it. So I sort of was much more focused when I did work on it, and I think that actually helped. So this is not general advice, this is just sort of what happened, and it ended up working. And again, I tried to be much more concrete about what I was going to do. Because I started late, I didn't have time to ask for feedback. That's just what happened. But it worked out okay anyway. Okay. By the way, I'd be happy to take, I think we're not taking questions during the talks, but I'd be more than happy to talk afterwards, or if there's time at the end of this presentation. Actually, I don't want to talk about the content of the proposal because it's, you know, your alls will be very, very different. So talk maybe a little bit about the good advice I got as I was preparing for the proposal, both times. So one thing that was very helpful was to ask for and read people who had recently submitted career proposals. This was mainly junior faculty in my own department who were very willing to share what they had written. their successful proposals. And just both in terms of like the structure of what a proposal looks like and sort of what the right level of detail is, I found very helpful reading others. So I ended up reading probably 3 or 4 other career proposals, and that was very helpful. Now, as far as the sort of broader impacts in the teaching in the education plan is, I think another thing I got dinged on was this in my first time around. But I ended up writing something which I thought was similar to what I had read in my colleagues' proposals, right? Which was at the level of, I'm proposing this new course, I'm going to be mentoring undergrads, and so on. The sort of standard stuff you might see in any proposal, including the core proposals. But I got feedback about this that it was sort of maybe the minimally adequate teaching plan. So there's nothing stellar about it. Maybe it was okay, but it wasn't outstanding in any way. So I felt like, well, so that's not because I don't like teaching or I don't think it's important to have outreach. It's just I didn't feel particularly creative, or I didn't really know, it's not something unlike research, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. So what I found very helpful was what I did the second time around, which was I got advice that I should talk to, Cornell University, and I'm sure most if not all universities have programs that deal specifically with diversity and outreach and sort of these sort of things that fall under broader impacts. They are the experts on this, and I talked to them and got a lot of useful advice and ended up proposing to work with them to develop a program. So at Cornell University, the particular program that I found very helpful, there's actually several programs, but Cornell Engineering has diversity programs in engineering where they do a bunch of things, among which is sort of do outreach to K through 12 students, especially underrepresented students in STEM, or especially computer science, women and minorities in high school and middle school. So they do a lot of outreach, and so I talked to them. There's this great person, Sarah Hernandez, who I was told was a good person to talk to. I reached out to her, and this is something that's good to do. You shouldn't say you're going to collaborate with some other group on campus without asking them first and making sure they're on board with it. I don't think they'd like that. And plus, they wrote a letter of support for me, so that sort of bolstered the collaboration. So what I ended up doing was they hold what's called the Curie Academy. It's a 1-week summer program held at Cornell for high school girls in math and science. And it's always a program developed by a faculty member centered around some theme. And so they bring in these high school girls for a week, and you so you interact with them. And the goal is to sort of inspire them to study and go on in STEM fields. So with them, it turned out so this is very popular. They were actually booked all the way to 2015. So I ended up proposing that in summer of 2015, I'll, with their help, put on a workshop in using 3D imaging technology. So my own work in computer vision and image-based 3D modeling using the Kinect to create a program around this theme of using this technology for useful things that are actual real-world applications like medical or sort of understanding energy usage in buildings and so on. So so the nice thing is, it was mentioned earlier that you could fall into a trap of proposing too much, something that's not actually credible or something that would take so much time away from your research activities that you shouldn't do it. It would be a bad idea. Developing a whole new work. If I were to do this workshop without any support from this program, these diversity programs, I'd have to do registrations, I have to take applications, I have to do a whole bunch of stuff. But this infrastructure is there, so it's much more credible to sort of use that and build on top of it. So I think that worked out, that collaboration worked out well. Like I said, so I ended up talking to them probably 2 months before the proposal was due, just because they're very busy and you have to get that ball rolling, okay? You don't have to do anything like this, but this is just, for me, this was very helpful because I didn't know what would be important to, what's important to do it in this space, and they're the experts on that. Okay, so, okay, this is sort of a grab bag of different things, but here's, so some people ask me for advice about writing a career proposal, and sometimes I hear other people give advice about writing a career proposal. About a month ago, I was sitting around a table at Cornell. We have these sort of communal lunches, and I was overhearing somebody talk to a new professor about how they should write a career proposal, and they were saying things which I thought were probably bad advice, or things that you might think about, but which maybe you shouldn't worry about too much. Okay, so at Cornell, I was strongly encouraged by the department chair to write a career proposal when I first started, that first year, okay? So, I agree with the sentiment earlier that that's not necessarily the right plan. You should write it when you have a good idea and when you think you're ready to write a career proposal. But nonetheless, I took that advice and I did it. But what this person giving advice was saying is that you should be extra worried about writing a good proposal because it's the first thing you do, and if it goes badly, you know, there's some visibility to it. Certainly your department chair has to know that you're writing a career proposal because they have to write a letter, and there may be others. And if it goes badly, you know, maybe there's a sense that, you know, you're not a good person because this first thing you did didn't work. But that's what this faculty was trying to imply. I think that's totally wrong. I think it's very common to, well, first of all, it's very common to not write it the first time, and it's common that it's not funded for various reasons. There's many reasons why a career proposal wouldn't get funded. It doesn't mean anything. You know, I think senior faculty are very attuned to this fact, and they, you know, I certainly felt a bit washed up when mine was rejected, but I think this is sort of not, it shouldn't be a source of stress, okay? Again, this is totally my own view. I'm happy to be contradicted later. Another thing that this person was advising is it's not wise to write other NSF proposals like the core program before the career. Again, I think this was mentioned before. I don't think that's right. I think you should probably talk to your, it's very specific on the actual details, but you should talk to your program manager about it. I don't think having funding is at all looked on as a, at least, well, so I worked with Jay as my program manager, and I know he's very conscientious about funding careers and knowing that it's sort of separate from the other programs and it's something special. It's not just funding, it's an award. It's something that's prestigious. So, you know, I think, you know, I suspect most program managers would be conscientious of that fact and would not hold, you know, previous funding by NSF against you. For me, also, it was a good experience writing these other proposals and getting, you know, sort of understanding the process and what a good proposal looks like. Of course, I think the only thing I would say here is that I found that stuff that I put in my first proposal sort of got reappropriated to these other proposals I had written. So actually, the second proposal I wrote was sort of almost completely disjoint from the first proposal I wrote. They were similar in some ways, and the basic vision was kind of similar, but the actual details and what I proposed to work on was sort of different, partly because I had taken pieces and put them in these other proposals. So that's you want to make sure it's not overlapping too much with other NSF proposals that you may have written and are funded, but I don't think you have to worry about too much about this, about having prior support. And I messed up with both of these things, and it still worked out. So, you know, I think it's good to be skeptical about some of the advice you might get. I mean, these are things that I certainly resonated with me and things that I worried about. Like, in fact, things that I agonized about. Is this, you know, am I shooting myself in the foot by writing these other proposals? But you know, you can talk to your program manager and they might assure you, but it's okay. I think I stress too much about these kinds of things. Okay, I want to say a little bit. I've never been on a career panel. I think I couldn't have been eligible, but I have been on other panels, other core panels, and I can say a little bit about what I personally liked and didn't like when reading other proposals. Some proposals are just a joy to read. They address an interesting problem, and they are very clear as to what the main ideas are, and they have a coherent story. It all fits together. Those are ones that I personally liked a lot and which I found did well in panels. On the other hand, there's a class of, I don't want to be disparaging here, but there's sort of a class of proposals that are very hard to deal with because they might sound good as a summary, but when you get into the details, it's sort of very difficult to tease out what actually the proposal is talking about. So I've read, and therefore it's hard because you're sort of negatively inclined towards it. You can't sometimes put your finger on why this is not a good proposal. It just doesn't work. It's not well written, or but you end up spending a lot of time trying to understand it without much success. I say, a lot of times I read a proposal where I understand the area, but I'm not an expert, so that makes it extra hard if you've assumed that I sort of know everything about a particular sub-area. Other things that I found annoying is having an exciting problem statement, but having a lot of sentences that are very vague or have lots of buzzwords. So it's sort of content-free in a way. So here's a sentence which might appear in a proposal and which is just a sort of made-up sentence. This research plan seeks a robust theoretical treatment by exploring the rich theory of PDEs and their numerical characteristics. I can certainly see a sentence like this being a good sentence to have in certain proposals, but without any context or anything about what this actually means, this could mean anything. So, I personally see things like this and they send red flags. If this appears without any other information, I have no idea what you're talking about, okay? So just that's something to keep in mind. So what else? That's pretty much it. That's my experience. Again, I'm just one data point, and other people's experience may be very different, but this is sort of my process and how I got to this point. I think I'll leave it at that, and if there's questions, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. Again, I'm also very happy to share my proposal for what it's worth. I should put my email address up here, but I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. Thank you very much.
let me introduce our next speaker. Her name is Sanjukta Banja, and she received her career proposal from the CCF division. And now she's going to tell us her experience.
Okay, so first of all, there are many resources available, and I actually searched in Google. There was career proposal tips. There is like that many hits, okay? So there are many, many resources available, okay? And one of the best that I found is here. So, and it is written by multiple faculty members. So it's a perspective of many, many people. And here, this is almost like a personal story. So I have a slide that explains it. So, I mean, it's very experiential. So you have to take it with large grain of salt. So this is my data point. I was third time lucky. So I had a lot of experience on this. So between my first and second, I felt that I made significant progress. You know, I evolved. But between second and third, I mean, it was basically very same proposal. So I'm going to say a little bit. Certain things did change. For example, my figures changed. I spent, like, you know, it's very crucial. It's very crucial to, you know, not have small figures, and because a lot of time panelists are in a hurry, you know, and they're, you know, so they changed, and my publication changed, but the core theme didn't change, okay? So again, I mean, also I'll talk a little bit about the reviews I got. I mean, that made me not change the central theme, because my second times the reviews were very good, but they felt it cannot be done. So they said that it's not doable in 5 years. So, but they were not negative on the theme. So that's why I sort of stuck to the, you know, the main theme and sort of tried to prove that it can be done, and had some preliminary results to support that. So this is the self-assessment from my first one. So it is like the cross-layer modeling between switching and error in VLSI circuits. And it had one major difficulty. It's too close to my PhD work, and this was already funded. I mean, in fact, my advisor was funding at the same time when my career proposal, I mean, getting funded at the same time, so there was overlap there. My teaching plans were established. In fact, I got very good feedback on my teaching plans, but because the research was not adequate, you know, it didn't make it. So one of the first thing I did is I went to, I think this is one of the most valuable, like $250 that I spent on going to NSF and meeting Dr. Basu. I mean, one of the most precious, because I opened with my laptop and I showed the type of problems I'm working on, and then he gave some ideas, and he kind of said that you need to have a little more, you know, diversity, even though in a central theme, because you're launching a career and not just one research problem. So you have heard this before, so I'm just going to skip that. And then I already was working on nanocomputing and CMOS simultaneously, and I was trying to publish, you know, in good journals and things like that. So between first and second, and then this was my second attempt. So I had two core themes. One was on learning automata and Bayesian network, but I was doing quantum cellular automata. I was having CMOS. The whole thing was under the same umbrella of studying trade-off between reliability and error and power. So this has been a central theme in my area for some time now. In fact, recent like call for failure resilient system kind of resonates with that. So it was in the right direction. And then I found external mentors. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, because they were very instrumental for me. Some of them also wrote my tenure letters. So there are various reasons that you should seek them, I mean, seek help from them. So this was my third attempt. And so between second and third, I again called Dr. Basu and I said, what happened? Because the reviews, you know, I had a couple of excellent, maybe one like good, you know, how it didn't make it? And then he kind of said that people felt that it was too much. So I said, okay, I mean, so I'm going to publish and maybe make it more credible, you know. And so that 1 year, I mean, by the time it got rejected, I think it was January, and till that July, I just focused on publishing and changing my figures and showing my proposal to a proofreader and getting some feedback from my colleagues that are in the same area, things like that. So, and I had some letters from industry that kind of said, and this was not like, but in no means like we will fund this or something. It was like, it's an exciting area and we want to see how it progresses, that type of letter, like sort of very encouraging letters. And then 2 of my peers, they read the proposal and they suggested few non-technical but very critical flow changes, like, so this particular section is hanging, and things like that. So when you are writing, you are immersed in it. Sometimes you are not having the right perspective of a panelist. So if you get it reviewed by someone that is a panelist in your area, sometimes you get to see those points. Okay, and then my pictures became much better. And then there are this reduce some dimensions to cover more depth. This part I'm going to talk more about later, so I will come back to that. So this was the feedback given to me. So again, some guidelines, and this is a very famous picture, and it's from Thailand. It's very common in Southeast Asia. It's like 6 blind people are looking at an elephant, and depending on where they looked, they had different ideas about what they're looking at. So that's it's very subjective. Everybody experiences it differently. So you have to make your own judgment, and but this should only help you. I mean, that's the goal. So in research planning, I feel that this is something that helped me, is that I started working on my preliminary data, and I started publishing, and some of which that was not published, I started to make those data available a little bit in the proposal. So answering back to this question, my papers were maybe between first and best. When in the third time, it's not the last paper, but it's definitely not the first paper. So, I mean, so it was somewhere between first and best when I got the award. And so what happens if you have publication in a competitive place, then that gives confidence to the panelist who is not exactly working in this area. And this is particularly true in those of you that are working in emerging technologies, because there are plasmonics, magnetics, I mean, one panelist is not supposed to know all the other areas. So it's very critical. And then tasks should be closely coupled, because some of the proposals that I have read, it appeared that this is like basically a collection of 4 proposals put together in 15 pages. So, and it makes each one of them very, shallow and less rigorous. So this is the second thing. So you have to have a balance between the near-term and far-term goals. And then I already talked about that. It should not read like decoupled 4 ideas or 5 ideas for 5 years of funding. It should have like a common theme. Okay, and then it should have the right balance of fundamentals and significance. And this is another thing. If it sounds like it's very sort of trivial, like you are adding A, B, C, and D that are already known, then somehow it doesn't sell that well to panelists. Like it has to have a non-translational angle. And this is already discussed by the previous speaker. You should have a balance between the risk and the feasibility. I mean, because all the panelists were there before, so they know how much can be done with the amount of course load that you will be dealing with in your university, So pay some attention. This is another thing, educational research, and this is very much program sensitive, because I actually served in College of Engineering career panel we had inside our college. And I noticed that in some of the programs, education and research is like 50-50, like maybe 60-40, Yes. So they have a lot of emphasis, and I was shocked, because there were these faculties that are proposing to do a magic show, and I mean, it was humongous amount of effort in some divisions that so it's very sensitive to, program. So you should talk to your program manager to see in your own area what's the general consensus. Okay. So in my case, I was already working. I had a TUSE grant later on my education thing. So one of the few ideas that I think are not, I don't see, is you can always use some, validate somebody else's work in your classroom. That is usually not that time consuming, like some established like TUS proposal or some, like suppose I was dealing with like active learning with sensory components. So there are a lot of instruments. So what you can do is borrow an instrument and sort of, in your own classroom, you are anyway going to classroom, might as well like plan a little and, get some data and say, okay, in VLSI classrooms, this works better than this, something like that. Some evaluation, some assessment component if you can add. Maybe a table, it shouldn't take too much space because you don't have too much space, but you can always work on that. And then the last point is very, very crucial, is create a portfolio in teaching. This is also important for tenure because we usually neglect this completely. And right before mid-tenure, we kind of wake up. And if you have that, you will see that you have a lot of data point. Maybe you have done a mid-semester assessment and changed something after that, or maybe you saw that this particular learning style didn't work at all. Those data points, if you document them, it will be much easier to do a career proposal on that. You don't have to spend, my point is you can plan a little bit ahead so that you don't have that very traumatic last 1.5 months where you're trying to like add some cool ideas in your teaching plan. Just document whatever you are doing and work on assessment. I think it was already mentioned, it is very critical. And then outreach, so there are a lot of local resources now in your university. I'm pretty convinced about this. And in my university, we had like an RET site grant, and I had worked with one of the teachers. Then I go to like Great American Teach-ins. Whatever you do, try to like, and maybe you can give a talk in a local museum on your research, things like that, like document them so that it doesn't look all like future tense. Like I would do this, I would do that, so just say I have done this, and I will continue this, and this is the new idea that I'm going to work on, something like that. And then if you have a community college around your, area, maybe you can talk to one of the faculties there and try to do something jointly that will help. And then this is something that I have done, so I participated in Sloan and McKnight conferences. And so basically get some track record. So for example, I'm the, yes? Sloan, McKnight is for African American and minority students. So in Florida, they have a big, they organize conference. So you have to see what is there in Arizona. And Sloan is for, it started as in Hispanic groups, but it is also for women, underrepresented, and minorities. So, and then CRAW is one of the consortium that addresses women issues. So you can attend some of them, you get lots of ideas, and so it doesn't look that you are just fishing up some words from NSF's guideline of broader impact. So that's like easily understood. So if you get some letters from people who have already worked with, those will be much strong letters, not like template letters. So that's something that maybe it's just get it. If you are geared towards this, I think maybe you are already doing this. So just document them. And then this is something that I kind of did once I saw that my first attempt was failed. So what I did is I targeted a few conferences where I routinely went. Every year I went. So what happens, you get a common set of people that you can network. Suppose going to DAC or ICCAD in our area, you have like 1,000 or 1,500 attendees. You don't get that contact. But if you target a conference in your area that's like 150, 100 attendees, then you have much more one-to-one contact. In fact, two of the peers that read my proposal are both from, this, I'm talking about GLS. Later on, I became program chair. This connection helps you also in service, and because you are routinely going to that same conference, people see you and trying to kind of, network with you. So then I had few external mentors, and at least two of them were recent career award winners from my division, so that helped. They gave me the current perspective, and then those two are already discussed. And then this is the thing that when I was in a panel, I feel that panelists are very busy, and so they should not have to surf through all 15 pages to find out what exactly you are trying to say. So particularly important are intellectual merit, research objectives, and educational goals. Those things, I mean, you should have a word that it starts with those. Intellectual merit of this proposal is 1, this, 2, this, 3, this. Like, so, I mean, when they're writing the review, it becomes easier for them, and they also get a, sorry about this, but, you know, I mean, because I served in the panel, I saw that some proposals, like, are right away, like, addressing the panelists. Much more, I mean, they're doing a good job, of course, describing their research problem, but they're also looking at the panelists' point of view. You know, but broader impact of this proposal is 1, this, 2, this, 3, this, and then you see, okay, it's all in one place. I can, you know, so, and then it is clearly you have to. I mean, if your proposal's 6th page, 7th page, you are introducing very key concept, then my advice would be serve in a panel. You just see how you read others' proposals. You know, that's very critical. You have to introduce key concept in the first 2 pages and preferably in summary. Okay, so, and you can like sort of support, you know, your concepts, but you know, it really helps. And then the last one I already said that most proposals have almost no prior work in the broader impact and education component. So maybe you can do a little bit that will separate you from others. I mean, I don't want to argue whether it's necessary, whether it's not necessary, but it's definitely, if you have a good research plan and you back it up with the other 2, it's definitely going to separate you from the pool. So this we already discussed, so I'm going to kind of skip this. Okay, this is another thing. It should be really exciting. You know, by the time maybe you wrote the proposal, maybe you have worked and you are yourself seeing some dark sides, you know, that cannot come in the writing. That cannot come. It's true with all areas, right? You work more and you see, oh my God, this tremendous bottleneck. I will tell you because this quantum cellular automata had that. The more I worked on it, the more I saw that, you know, how difficult it is to fabricate and to model. So when you are writing that, if that comes in, you know, then you have to write the proposal on a different idea where your excitement is the key thing here, you know. You cannot, you know, be negative on that. And then avoid like laundry list of tasks, you know, make them coupled and make a case as soon as possible. And this, by as soon as possible, I mean in summary. You have to make a case in summary. And then do not introduce a key excitement at 5th page, because if you see the readability kind of first few pages, very large readability. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th is sort of, you know, I mean, it has a lot of detailed on equations and stuffs and very detailed graphs and stuff like that. And then again, 12th, 13th, 14th is very important. There you are saying long-term objectives, plans, prior supports, you know, how you're going to mentor. So it's not equally read, okay? So that's why, I mean, you need to say why, I mean, you can have lots of rigor. You know, NSF proposals are rarely without rigor, but then it needs to be justified in page 1 or 2. Otherwise, people have already made decision. That's the thing. So support letter. So I had really good support letter. Not many, but maybe 2 or 3. But I was working with them. So their letters were not like. So here, I mean, I didn't want to write it in text, but sometimes we have this tendency of drafting the support letter for someone, right? So that is a big no-no. I mean, and I didn't want to write this. So, I mean, sometimes support letters are so big, comes with so much details that, you know, it kind of provokes like worries, you know. So make my meaningful, I mean, really collaborate with them and then ask for support. Then it becomes valid support letters, you know. So this is, I'm going to skip this, lot of discussion on this already. And actually, one of the feedback I got from one of my mentors was that you have a very strong 20-page proposal, because when I was writing, I couldn't condense it properly. So I thought of getting a feedback on the 20-page one. And then as soon as I got done to 15-page, I sent him again. And he was disappointed with the 15-page ones. He said, oh, now everything is looking half a page. You don't, I mean, you know, so you have to kind of maybe worry about removing some of the things to, so that balance is very critical. So, and then this is something that is very personal, because sometimes it has happened to me that I sent a paper, and once I saw the paper in IEEE Explore, I was shocked. Did it happen to any one of you? Like, I was like, I wrote this paper? That mode. Because when you are writing, you are in this zone. So sometimes you are not making sense. So, like pause. It's very important. You write, then you pause, and then you look back, whether you are emphasizing the right things or, actually 2-3 times this has happened to me. So now even before I send camera ready, I kind of pause. And then I read it, try to read it, because, you are in that zone, you're in a hurry, this deadline, you send something, and then, so give some time to the editing. And don't continuously edit it. You pause and then edit. So that really helped me. And these are the helps I got. And so I got some proofreader to read it, and then one of my department, one person used to write very good 3D pictures and draw. So I asked to get some suggestions. And then the most important help came from my ex-dean, who was currently in NCSU, and he was also in NSF, Louis Martin Vega. And he kind of read a little bit, first 2-3 pages, and said, how is it going to change in the VLSI industry? And I didn't know how to answer that question. And then immediately I got that feedback that it's not, cutting that significance. It's not groundbreaking, So, so those are very important help that one needs to get, I think. And then there are certain untrue assumptions. And then one of them I already discussed, that all the details will be like word 0 to word n will be read with equal importance. That's not true. And then you need to, some people think that they have to have 5 innovation, each innovation per year, some sort of algorithm. Those things are not true, okay? And then this is another thing. The NSF guidelines can sometimes change. So when you are doing it multiple times, look back the current one. Maybe the support letter has now have to be 2-page. Maybe before it was 1 page and things like that. So one thing in the support letter, if you are like from a school like mine, try to negotiate a release time, because it is documented. If you are teaching 2+2 courses, try to negotiate a release time in the when the chairman is writing that letter. So they have to, then you get a little bit break to do research, And then some people are like, oh, formatting is not important. But sometimes you can have a panelist that will look and say, oh, because I have seen one in one of the panel, I'm like, oh, this person have really seen that the margins are not right, but some people are very meticulous. So you can have one of them and, so. And then final draft, this is another thing. I think that you should get one of your students to read the summary and just the figures. Just let them read the summary and then figures and the captions and see if it tells a story. Because judgments are made very quickly, So what happens, you take the first summary and then you just, So I do that for the papers also, and it always, and then do a good overview pictures, and then this is, I can skip, already mentioned. Yeah, this is another thing. You should definitely do that. I will conclude my talk with this one, because when you see yourself as a panelist, you just see the effort you put in, then, you will appreciate how to write your own proposal much better. Thank you.